I'm very grateful to all of you for being here today. I know there's a lot of competition. There's competition in Pondi from something at Saka, and there's a lot of competition here in Auroville with important meetings that are going on. But we announced this event first. We have announced it way back in April, and I'm very glad that some of you are here. Many familiar faces. It's so nice to see the familiar faces, and it's nice to see some new faces also. So with joy, I welcome you all to this fourth Dr. M.V. Nadkarni Memorial Lecture. It's a great honor for me to be asked and allowed to be in the speaker's seat instead of the hostess. My team here have done a wonderful job of all the preparations. I told them this time, I'm just the speaker, you have to take care of all the details. And so far as I can see, it's been done very, very nicely. And it's a joy for all of us here at Savitri Bhavan to participate in this annual tribute to Dr. Nadkarni. Savitri Bhavan has been blessed by the divine grace with three very special patrons. The first to grasp the significance of this project was our beloved elder brother, Dr. Nirod Baran, who inspired us all when he laid the foundation stone of Savitri Bhavan on November 24th, 1995, and invoked the presence and blessings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother for this place and its mission, which at that time he envisioned more clearly than any of us. He had a very clear vision of the mission of Savitri Bhavan, and we have had to gradually grasp that, no? And I believe that it was in the following year, probably 1996, that Dr. Nadkarni came here for the first time and sat with us one Sunday morning under the teak trees. At that time there was no building, not even the Keat hut we had later on. And that day he shared with us his love of Sri Aurobindo's Savitri and the fascination which motivated him to share his explorations of it with whoever would listen to him wherever he happened to be. By then he'd already initiated his series of regular darshan study camps at the beach office in Pondicherry. And from 1997 onwards, he started coming here personally at first, after the close of those study camps, to share the content of the study camps with us here. And gradually more and more of his students, some of you must have been amongst them, would come along and share those sessions. So it was in August 1999 that he gave the first official summary session here in the garden. The first building had just come up and just been opened, and we all sat out here in the garden. That became a regular event which continued twice a year up to March 2007, when he addressed us all here for the last time. And he sat here where I'm sitting now and inaugurated the use of this amphitheatre. It was the very first time that we used it. So today again we are here to commemorate those happy occasions and to express our gratitude to that great Savitri lover who gathered us all together here for what he regarded as sacred yajnas, consecrated worship of the mantric epic through reverential study, attempting to draw ever deeper towards the mystic kernel of the Master's revelations. It's in grateful memory and celebration of all that he brought to us that I offer this sharing this afternoon. And the third patron, of course, was Huta, who in 2001 handed over to our care all the meditations on Savitri paintings which she'd created under the Mother's guidance from 1961 to 66, along with a lot of related materials. So her goodwill and support until her passing in November 2011 has formed a substantial base for the development of Savitri Bhavan. This talk may be a little longer than the other ones. Dr. Nadkarni was a professional and he stuck strictly to the academic hour, which is only 45 minutes. And Dr. Alok last time spoke for a little longer. I may have been a little over-ambitious in the scope of what I felt inspired to share with you of my own explorations in this never-ending ocean of gems, which is Savitri. So that's why we set the starting time a little earlier, so that all of you can be sure of reaching Pondicherry by 6 p.m. without any problem. I've subtitled this talk, Part 1 of Savitri. This is the part of the poem which Aurobindo spent most time on composing and revising. And it underwent a huge enlargement from 1937 to 1944. During that time, the theme of Aswapati's yoga and the worlds and planes through which he traveled expanded from 471 lines in the version as it stood in January 1937 to over 10,000 lines in the final version. I shall not be discussing Cantos 1 and 2 of Book 1, the Book of Beginnings. Those two cantos form the glorious overture to Sri Aurobindo's symphonic epic. And Canto 4, The Secret Knowledge, will be mentioned only in passing. I shall try to stick to the main theme, the traveller and the worlds he passes through and conquers. And I'd like to close with a final glance at the significance of this part of the poem for us, its readers. So, the traveller, Aswapati. Who is this traveller? I'm sure you're all familiar with the author's note, Sri Aurobindo's author's note, where he says that Asvapati, the lord of the horse, Savitri's human father, is the lord of tapasya, the concentrated energy of spiritual endeavor that helps us to rise from the mortal to the immortal plane. That is his role. And of course he mentions in the same note that the characters in the poem are not personified qualities, but incarnations or emanations of living and conscious forces with whom we can enter into concrete touch. And they take human bodies in order to help man and show him the way from his mortal state to a divine consciousness and immortal life. When Sri Aurobindo introduces Asvapati in the poem, he calls him one in the front of the immemorial quest, a leader, a thinker and toiler in the ideal's air, a colonist from immortality. And Mother has made a very interesting comment on these lines and the following ones. I've cut all my quotations very short, otherwise we could be here all night. No, I wanted to make long quotations. Mother has said, this is the description of the one through whom Savitri was born. Sri Aurobindo says it's through the intermediary of somebody who did not belong to the earth, but came from higher and freer regions. This is the description of one of those who are not purely human, but whose origin is far higher, far greater, and whose existence is much longer than the existence of the earth. When these come upon earth, it is to help the whole of humanity to rise towards the highest consciousness. His name means the Lord of the Horse, and in the Vedic imagery, the horse is a symbol of energy, usually vital energy. So all of us have horses, but usually we are not in full control of them. But Asvapati is the Lord, the master of his energies, and he can direct them to the fulfillment of his aims and aspirations. In a talk with some disciples, Sri Aurobindo is reported to have said, Asvapati, the father of Savitri, is the Lord of energy. The birth of Savitri is a boon of the supreme goddess given to Asvapati. Asvapati is the yogi who seeks the means to deliver the world out of ignorance. Is he Sri Aurobindo? It has become almost a commonplace of Savitri commentary to say that the account of Asvapati's yoga, as shown in part 1 of the poem, can be seen as Sri Aurobindo's spiritual autobiography. And just as devotees and Savitri lovers identify the figure of Savitri with the mother, Sri Aurobindo is identified with King Asvapati. For what greater embodiment of that concentrated energy and that yogic aspiration to deliver the world has there ever been than the Master himself? Nevertheless, I think that we need to be careful to avoid making this identification too literal. Once when I wrote Asvapati can be seen as Sri Aurobindo himself, my beloved teacher Amal Kiran corrected me by adding the words "an aspect of" before Sri Aurobindo's name. Undoubtedly, the yoga of Asvapati must be based on and authenticated by Sri Aurobindo's own experiences, as also on experiences of the mother. And we shouldn't forget that the whole poem, and not the description of a particular character only, is an expression of Sri Aurobindo's vision and his experience. Whatever is contained in this supreme revelation, this supreme achievement of spiritual poetry, is the product of Sri Aurobindo's consciousness and experience, based not on imagination, but his own direct lived experiences. However, so far as we can tell from what Sri Aurobindo's revealed about the course of his own sadhana, it didn't follow exactly the orderly scheme that he has shown for his Asvapati. And when he was asked directly about this, Sri Aurobindo has stated explicitly, this incarnation of Savitri is supposed to have taken place in far past times, when the whole thing had to be opened so as to hew the ways of immortality. The circumstances of this life have nothing to do with it, he said. Somebody was trying to make a too literal identification. So having said that, let's move on to the stages of his quest. In the Mahabharata telling of the legend of Shraddhavan and Savitri, Savitri's father, King Asvapati, is said to have worshipped the goddess Savitri for 18 years, praying for 100 sons. And at the end of that time, the goddess blesses him and tells him that Brahma, the creator, has granted him the boon of a single daughter who will fulfill all his wishes. So in Sri Aurobindo's Savitri, can we find any parallel to this 18 years yajna mentioned in the legend? Possibly we can interpret these years as marking steps in Asvapati's quest and in his realizations. So now I'd turn our attention to these stages. In a letter to Amal Kiran, Sri Aurobindo has said that in his poem, Asvapati's yoga falls into 3 parts or stages. First, he is achieving his own spiritual self-fulfillment as the individual. And this is described as the yoga of the king. So there are 2 cantos with this title in Book 1. Next, he makes the ascent as a typical representative of the race, to win the possibility of discovery and possession of all the planes of consciousness. And this is described in the 2nd book. This is the journey through the worlds. But this too is as yet only an individual victory. Finally, he aspires no longer for himself, but for all, for a universal realization and new creation. That is described in the Book of the Divine Mother. So the first stage, Asvapati's individual self-fulfillment, is described in the 2 cantos entitled The Yoga of the King, cantos 3 and 5 of Book 1. And the first one deals with the yoga of the soul's release. In it, Asvapati is shown as having already reached a very high level of soul development. And at this point, his further fulfillment is aided by higher powers until a seer was born, a rishi, a shining guest of time. And the rest of the canto narrates how the powers of wisdom, inspiration, intuition, discrimination, illumine and transfigure this great yogi, bringing about a first transformation of his nature, his soul's release from ignorance, his mind and body's first spiritual change. And as a result, he became able to draw the energies that transmute and age. He made great dreams, a mold for coming things, and cast his deeds like bronze to front the years. His walk through time outstripped the human stride. Lonely his days, and splendid like the sun's. So when we read these magnificent lines at the close of Canto 3, we can't help feeling that they describe Sri Aurobindo himself. And this statue that we have at the front, I feel that this would be a wonderful caption for those, for that statue, this image of Sri Aurobindo, lonely his days and splendid like the sun's. But Asvapati has much further to go. As a result of this first realization, he gains the secret knowledge which is revealed in Canto 4 of Book 1. And at the beginning of Canto 5, we are told this knowledge, this secret knowledge, first he had of time-born men. So this puts it very, very far back in the past. And Sri Aurobindo summarizes the essence of this secret knowledge in the first section of Canto 5. And as a result of that knowledge, we are told of Asvapati, a will, a hope immense now seized his heart, and to discern the superhuman's form, he raised his eyes to unseen spiritual heights, aspiring to bring down a greater world. This is the motivation which uplifts Asvapati throughout the rest of his quest, right up to the end of Book 3. He gathers all his energies and all his being into a single upward movement of aspiration, one pointed to the immaculate delight, questing for God as for a splendid prey. He mounted, burning like a cone of fire. He just takes off like a rocket, aiming for the higher levels. And in response to this intense aspiration comes about a tremendous transforming descent, which brings about in his nature a new and bornless change, a new transformation of his whole being, a second step. And as a result of this second transformation, Asvapati gains a new knowledge and a new power. He gains mastery over that enigmatic secret nature that both Mother and Sri Aurobindo have referred to as the mother of dreams. She is the threshold guardian of the subtle worlds. And with her surrender to him, her granting to him of all her powers, Asvapati for the first time glimpses the hierarchy of worlds. And I consider this a very, very helpful and significant passage. I like to read this to you. What he sees is ascending and descending twixt life's poles, the serried kingdoms of the graded law. It's got steps, plunged from the everlasting into time, then glad of a glory of multitudinous mind, and rich with life's adventure and delight, and packed with the beauty of matters, shapes and hues, climbed back from time into undying self, up a golden ladder carrying the soul, tying with diamond threads the spirit's extremes. It's a double series of worlds, the worlds of involution, where all the divine powers plunge to progressively more and more unconscious levels, finally founding matter. And then parallel to that, there's a series of ascending worlds which support and reflect all the possible evolutionary stages. So Asvapati is able to enter those subtle realms and start on his exploration of this hierarchy of the worlds. And he visits both the kind of worlds, the evolutionary worlds and the involutionary worlds. So Aurobindo outlined his plan and intention for what has now become Book 2 in some notes that he wrote to Amal Kiran in 1937 and 1938. There he mentions there's a long passage describing Asvapati's progress through the subtle physical, vital and mental worlds towards the overmind. It is the realization of Godhead with which it will end. This long passage became the 15 cantos of Book 2. I will try to give a very brief summary of those stages, but before we start to follow these stages, I think we should ask and answer the question, where and what are these worlds? I found, as if by grace, or certainly by grace, an answer when I was looking for something quite different in Sri Aurobindo's book, The Secret of the Veda. There's an essay called The Doctrine of the Mystics. And there he asks precisely this question, where are these worlds? And he says, they are here. Man draws from the life world his vital being, from the mind world his mentality. He is ever in secret communication with them. He can consciously enter into them, be born into them if he will, even into the solar worlds of the truth he can rise, enter the portals of the superconscient, cross the threshold of the supreme. The divine doors shall swing open to his increasing soul. And he continues, the human ascension is possible because every being really holds in himself all that his outward vision perceives as if external to him. This material life and our narrowly limited consciousness of the physical world are far from being the sole experience permitted to man. If maternal earth bore him and retains him in her arms, yet is heaven also one of his parents. So we are material beings. Earth is our mother. We have to help in her fulfillment, but we can only do so because heaven is one of our parents and our soul has all the infinite capacities of the highest. So let us now attempt to follow the stages of this journey, although it will be in a very brief and summary fashion. So the first canto of Book 2, is called The World's Stair, and there Asvapati has another vision of this hierarchy as of a mountain with many, many levels. And he tells us, planted on earth, it holds in it all realms. This is the single stair to being's goal. There's one series of steps. Its steps are paces of the soul's return from the deep adventure of material birth, a ladder of delivering ascent and rungs that nature climbs to deity. That's the evolutionary process. And then he tells us that all these planes have been created as the result of the wide and prone leap of a Godhead's fall. The great world mother, by her sacrifice, has made her soul the body of our state. It's difficult for us to believe and to realize that this could be the soul of the mother herself. But he tells us our earth is a fragment and a residue. Her power is packed with the stuff of greater worlds. So all that is within us. So there in that first canto he tells us something about the real nature of our material world, about the mystery of it. Then the next canto, the kingdom of subtle matter. That's the next step above earth. This is also a world of forms, like our gross material world, but subtler and lovelier forms. And he says there, matter and soul can meet in conscious union. We always feel a division between our physical body and our diviner parts, but that is not necessary in the world of subtle matter. That realm contains the ideal templates of all forms and events here, and that realm provides the soul with the material of all its subtler bodies. We have subtle bodies that correspond to all the levels, and when our soul comes back into the material world, it puts on one by one all these subtle bodies, and it comes back finally into the physical body. He says of that world, out of its fall, out of its lowest levels, our denser matter came. Those lovelier forms can be a danger for those who enter there without sufficient purity and discrimination, because it cares only for beauty. It lends beauty to the terror of the gulfs and fascinating eyes to perilous gods, invests with grace the demon and the snake. So this world cannot retain Asvapati long. He moves on. He left that fine material paradise, his destiny lay beyond, in larger space. So the next level is the life worlds. They are of tremendous importance for us, and Asvapati's exploration of them covers 7 cantos of Book 2, cantos 3 to 9. More than half the lines of the whole of Book 2 are concerned with the life worlds. Because here in these worlds lie the origin and the remedy of the appalling problems of falsehood and error, wrong and evil that face us so poignantly in the world. And because of the difficulties that life presents us with, many spiritual disciplines encourage us to turn away from life. But that is not Sri Aurobindo's view. He says that life in its origin is a divine power and a great goddess. Pure and bright from the timeless was her birth. Her moods are faces of the infinite. Beauty and happiness are her native right, and endless bliss is her eternal home. Asvapati is able to see the glorious kingdoms of griefless life in all their blissful variety and power, but he's not able to enter there, because a darker air encircles still his soul. Too near to suffering worlds his nature lived, because he's still a human being. A dire duality is our way to be. How has this situation come about? The gracious, great-winged angel of life has poured out all her beauty and creative joy onto this world of matter. But all these gifts have been swallowed up in the darkness and inertia of the inconscient. Life here is a prisoner of matter. How can it ever become the divine life it is intended to be? That is the problem Asvapati has set out to solve, and to do so he has to go down into the depths. For so only could he know the obscure cause of all that holds us back and baffles God in the jail delivery of the imprisoned soul. Our souls are as if imprisoned, and matter is always holding us back. So, after exploring the evolutionary kingdoms and godheads of the little life and the involutionary worlds of the greater life, he has to descend into the night of falsehood and evil and face all the terrors and threats, swallowed up in all the horrors of hell, where his only sunlight was his spirit's flame. But he was able to meet with his bare spirit naked hell, and then he could see the hidden heart of night. And there, in the last locked subconscious floor, he saw the secret key of nature's change. And this brings about again another transformation in his nature. His whole life part gets divinized. Life beat pure in the corporeal frame, in the body. Night opened and vanished like a gulf of dream. Division ceased to be, for God was there. The soul lit the conscious body with its ray. matter and spirit mingled and were one. And suddenly, without making any effort at all, he is cast up into the paradise of the life gods. At last, he's found the way to enter those kingdoms of the griefless life. And there he's healed of all those terrible wounds, the rapture that the gods sustain, he bore. Immortality captured time and carried life. So this is a tremendously important realization, but the journey doesn't end there. Asvapati is not seeking personal liberation, but the way to transform earth life into the life divine. That's how he set out. So the life being has been divinized, and now he moves on to the conquest of the mind worlds. This part of the exploration extends over the next 4 cantos. Cantos 10 to 13. First he gains an overview of the whole range of the mind worlds. But first he must explore the evolutionary kingdoms of Godheads and Godheads of the little mind, where the golden child began to think and see. And there we can very well recognize this dwarf 3-bodied trinity, which is our little mind. The physical mind, forever stooping to hammer fact and form, conservative, tamasic. The rajasic mind of desire, he says, the hunchback rider of the red wild ass. And strongest and wisest of the 3, reason, armed with her lens and measuring rod and probe, trying to understand the earth and the stars, the objective universe around her. And above this trinity, which makes up the levels of our little mind, just briefly he refers to 2 higher levels, 2 sun-gazed daimons, spirits, witnessing all that is. A huge, high-winged life thought, a power to uplift the laggard world. It's those highest aspirations of life, they help the world to make progress. And beyond that, a pure thought mind, luminous in a remote and empty air. The highest level of our mind, which can make some approach towards the truth. Here Asvapati reaches the limits of the laboring power, that is, the limits of mind laboring in the evolutionary manifestation under the domination of matter. And beyond lie the unfettered realms of the greater mind, mind acting freely on its own plane, free of the downward drag of earth. And there Sri Aurobindo doesn't show us the whole scope of this greater mind, but he shows us 3 levels that are very important to us. 3 levels of first the archmasons, and then the architects and engineers and mathematicians, and then the sovereign kings of thought. And I think these beings, 3 levels of beings, these are what Mother has called the formateur. These are delegates of the divine mind which have shaped the material universe that we live in. They created all the lower planes, but including this material universe. And the 3rd and highest rank, they are trying to trap and contain and limit truth in order to create these forms of the universe. But Sri Aurobindo tells us that truth is wider, greater than her forms. She remains herself and infinite. She can't be limited by this defining power of mind. So Asvapati moves on further to the heavens of the ideal. It's quite a short and mysterious canto, but it appeals to many people because of the beautiful imagery. Ideals are our guiding stars, pointing us to higher realities, higher possibilities, uplifting and refining our senses, our thoughts, our will. So he sees these different levels, ascending series of heavens representing the ideal worlds. And they, on either side of this stair, the heavens of the ideal mind were seen. The lovely kingdoms of the deathless rose, and on the other, the mighty kingdoms of the deathless flame. Two kinds of ideal which have been influential in heightening our human lives. The ideal of delight in beauty, which draws our soul to discover and adore the all-wonderful in or behind all forms and experiences. And the ideal of the power of the dedicated will, which inspires us to make effort and sacrifice to gain higher knowledge and a higher kind of life. So Asvapati is able to move freely through these heavenly kingdoms and accepts their gifts, but he doesn't remain in any of them because they're all limited. Each of them is ruled by a single master idea and ideal. Each of them presents itself as the heart of the meaning of the universe, perfection's key, passport to paradise. They may help us, but beyond them there are realms where these two great types of ideal meet and join. And beyond that, there's even a level where all high and beautiful and desirable powers become a single multitudinous whole. In the truth world, all apparently opposing or contradictory ideals are harmonized in oneness. At last, we're told, there paused the climbing hierarchy of worlds. It's as if he's come to a place where it's difficult to go further. He's reached the self of mind. I can say the essence, the Purusha of mind, the witness Lord of nature's myriad acts. And it's also the thinker's secret base. When he reaches this plane, Asvapati feels at first a tremendous release. There he could stay. The self, the silence, one. His soul had peace. It knew the cosmic whole. The experience of the self is a great realization, a liberation, a form of moksha. But then he's led to another perception. A luminous finger fell on all things seen or touched or heard or felt, and showed his mind that nothing could be known. It smote at the very roots of thought and sense. Thought and sense, the senses which give us data about the world around us, and thought which organizes and interprets that data, these are the fundamental tools of mind. But he's shown that both the data and the interpretation are unreliable, even illusory. Mind cannot show us the world as it really is. What it saw was real, but its sight untrue. That must be reached, from which all knowledge comes. A greater spirit than the self of mind must answer to the questioning of his soul. So though it is liberating, this plane or this world doesn't contain the great transforming power that Asvapati is looking for in order to be able to free our world from the grip of ignorance. So in that state it seemed that to be was a prison and extinction the escape. But Asvapati remains steadfast in his aspiration and his intention, and in response to his seeking, he's shown another kind of escape. Not extinction, but a secret entrance into the world of soul, the psychic world, the seat of the mother as the soul of the world. He sees the world where our souls rest between birth and death, absorbing the experiences of their last birth and preparing the form of the next one. But then he's led on towards the source of all things human and divine. And there he sees the deathless two-in-one, a single being in two bodies clasped, whose trance of bliss sustained the mobile world. And behind them, in a morning dusk, one stood who brought them forth from the unknowable, the sole omnipotent goddess, ever veiled, of whom the world is the inscrutable mass. Asvapati recognizes her as the one he has been worshipping and longing for, and the power who can grant his prayer. He cast from the rent stillness of his soul a cry of adoration and desire, and the surrender of his boundless mind, and the self-giving of his silent heart. He fell down at her feet, unconscious, prone. Through this tremendous experience, Asvapati is enabled to enter the kingdoms of the greater knowledge, which I think we can interpret as the realms of the overmind gnosis. Gnosis means knowledge. In a note of 1918, Sri Aurobindo wrote to Amal, there's a long passage describing Asvapati's progress through the subtle physical, vital and mental worlds towards the overmind. So we have traced this progress, and now we've reached the last canto of Book 2. In another note of 1938, Sri Aurobindo noted, it is the realization of Godhead with which it will end. I don't dare to say anything more about Canto 15 of Book 2, except to point out its closing lines. He scanned the secrets of the overmind. He bore the rapture of the oversoul. His actions framed the movements of the gods. His will took up the reins of cosmic force. So he's no longer only controlling the physical, vital, and mental energies of his own being to make this tremendous ascent. He's now become the master of the cosmic energies imaged in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad as Dadikravan, the mighty horse of the universe. So we've come to the end of Book 2. There's still Book 3. In one of Sri Aurobindo's notes about the 1936 to 37 version, he's mentioned about the material which was to become book 3. First, this realization of Godhead, which will end book 2, and after that, the unknowable Brahman, then the Purushottama, and finally the Mother. These 3 great states or realizations with which Sri Aurobindo evidently planned to culminate that material which eventually expanded to become the present part 1 of Savitri. So the first canto of book 3 is called The Pursuit of the Unknowable, and the second is called The Adoration of the Divine Mother. The fourth, The Vision and the Boon, is devoted to the long colloquy between the Supreme Mother and Asvapati, which concludes with her granting the boon of the birth of Savitri as an emanation of herself to fulfill Asvapati's aspiration of transformation for earth and men. So where, if anywhere, do we find the Purushottama, and who or what is this Supreme Person? We've already reached 5 o'clock, and so I'm just going to give you my conclusion about this. I turned to Sri Aurobindo's letters on yoga, and there he seems to be using this term, Purushottama, as an equivalent of the Transcendent Mother, the Adya Shakti, the supramental Shakti, Mother of all the worlds. So this is the Mother who reveals herself to Asvapati as the soul of the world first, and enables him to enter the overmind kingdoms of the greater knowledge. This is the one whose presence he's longing for in book 3, and who's revealed to him in the adoration of the Divine Mother. But Sri Aurobindo says, I don't know that there's anything like a Purushottama consciousness which the human being can attain or realize for himself. The Purushottama consciousness is the consciousness of the Supreme Being, and man, by loss of ego and realization of his true essence, can live in it. And I think this is shown in the third canto, the beginning of the third canto, the vision and the house of the spirit and the new creation. The Adya Shakti has revealed herself to him. He knows that here is the ultimate solution he's been looking for. But how is he to attain her grace, the grace of the Transcendent Mother? He performs a tremendous last sacrifice of tapasya at the beginning of Canto 3. He tore desire up from its bleeding roots and offered to the gods the vacant place. And as a result, a last and mightiest transformation came. And there's a wonderful description of what that transformation meant for Asvapati. So I think that that's a description of Asvapati realizing himself as an eternal portion of the Purushottama and living in the Purushottama. In this state, he can enter into the house of the Spirit and experience the new creation. It's in this state that at last he can meet the Transcendent Mother face to face, hear her speak, insist on his prayer, and win the boon of the birth of Savitri. His return to earth with her promise and assurance marks the close of part 1 of Savitri. So this part 1 of Savitri I mentioned at the beginning, it's the part on which Sri Aurobindo spent the most time. Parts 2 and 3 he seems to have composed from 1945 to 1950, more or less written from scratch. some lines are there from very early versions. But by that time, obviously, he was in full mastery of his medium. But what has inspired Sri Aurobindo to expend all this time and concentration on the theme of Asvapati's quest, which did not form part of the original plan of the poem? In the darkest years of the Second World War, while the earth was passing through a huge crisis and convulsion, of which he and the mother alone grasped the full significance, Sri Aurobindo was noting down in these precise and powerful mantric lines all that we need to know to be able to fulfill our role and reach our highest destiny. To recall to us the forgotten knowledge coded in our depths of the nature and significance of the many layers of the evolutionary manifestation that our souls have accepted to inhabit, our place in it, our current role as human beings, and the key to how we can contribute to Sri Aurobindo's work. The Mother has told us that Sri Aurobindo's work is by serving the truth and enlightening mankind to hasten the rule of the Divine's love upon earth, thus bringing about a divine life here in the material universe for earth and man. All gratitude to Sri Aurobindo. Are we going to get a blessing of rain?